And it's Ken Kraetzer for CBSIServices, Talking Business. We're on Long Island today to talk with our friend Xena Ugrinsky, who is a data science expert. She is a CEO founder of Gen-X Incorporated. We met at a conference earlier this year in New York City. Xena, good to see you. How you doing?
I'm great, Ken. Thanks for the opportunity to be here.
Very good. Well, you've got a terrific background in the field of data science. You've worked at Booz Allen Hamilton, KPMG as a partner. Tell us, if you would, a little bit about some of the career steps for you in data science.
It's pretty simple. I started my career in finance as a business person. And interestingly, over a very quick, 8 years, came to recognize that I had a knack for technology, right? And that started with, for example, being the person that everyone called when they couldn't figure out how to make a script run in Excel, the tool of finance professionals. And so I parlayed that into becoming bilingual. Bilingual meaning I spoke business and I spoke technology. And that has served me very well in my goal to serve organizations and help them optimize their use of the information they have towards better business performance.
Well, that's so important. We see that now today in managing technology in a business. So important. The sheer amount of data, the sheer amount of technology applied to serving customers, certainly in our field in banking. Now, when we had a chance to chat in March down in New York City at an AI conference, which you were a terrific moderator on, you made the point about some things, kind of the growth of AI, but really that companies should look at what things should AI be applied to and other things that should be done manually. What have you seen this year as kind of examples of that important point you made?
I think the one that everyone is either familiar with or should be is Tesla. Everybody knows that Tesla has applied machine learning everywhere they can, to the point where they have 2 assembly lines that were fully automated. And now they've built a third where they are beginning to reintroduce the human because, one, it may not be cost effective to automate everything. And 2, there may be human nuances that you lose by over automation. And I think that we need to take that lesson and apply it to the use of AI and machine learning in business as businesses evolve their competency on the topic.
Well, certainly, I think tragically to the Boeing example with their airplane where they had an AI capability built into it and it couldn't be turned off by the pilots when it was found to be an issue. Any other examples you've seen this year of good uses of AI?
Where I'm seeing the most value be created around AI, applied AI in business, is not necessarily sort of directly applied machine learning. It's an interim step that no one's talking about, which is really, data mining, right? So we've talked about data mining in the context of business intelligence or BI, and in the context of enterprise performance management, or what Gartner calls corporate performance management, and identifying those areas where it's a middle ground between, basic BI and applied machine learning is really where you're going to develop the competencies that you need to. And I think you mentioned earlier, for example, how will smaller businesses be able to apply this? I'm working with a number of companies who are looking at their internal processes and figuring out, is there a way that we can use our medium data, not big data, right? Because we're a small company. So it's really small and medium data, and apply data science to those aspects of our business to optimize them. And that's where I'm seeing sort of the rubber hitting the road and this grassroots evolution of people getting comfortable with it before, for example, jumping from crawling to flying, right? Let's walk in between.
Absolutely. We also see and see some good presentations in the area of customer service where artificial intelligence is being applied to be able to handle a lot of routine situations and save the human element, the human interaction for perhaps more complicated needs. We see that in banking quite often. We've seen some good presentations from companies. Avaya in particular has a good presentation on that. What are you seeing in the world of financial services, customer service, anything in that area?
Sure. I think the first thing to remember is that it was marketing and customer service where we first applied data science effectively, right? So the identification of the consumer, the hyper and micro targeting of the consumer. That's where data science evolved from, the first applications. I think that financial services is taking a lesson from organizations like broadcasters, internet providers, who are really applying data science to the customer relationship management perspective. So organizations are now trying to help their CRMs or their customer service representatives better serve a customer who's calling in, who may be incredibly aggravated at the time, but provide that customer service individual a list of data that enables them to make the right decision about what to say next or where to take them, the customer next, particularly in cases where you've got an aggravated customer. The last thing you want to do is transfer them to somebody else and have the whole conversation start over again, right? So customer service is absolutely a place where financial services is going to be able to apply this sort of data science, where I think it's beginning to come together in financial services is some of the in-depth quant type work, derivatives work, et cetera, optimizing those things, because that's where you have the kind of data, the volumes of data to really make it effective.
Absolutely. And one of the things we wanted to have a chat about today and hear about is your new book coming out next year, Enterprise AI, Your Field Guide to the New Business Normal, and an aside to how AI and data science and data management is really so important to every business. It's not a future thing, it's a today thing. Why did you decide to document your thoughts in this book?
I saw a gap in the market. There are basically three types of organizations today. You've got your Googles, Ubers, Facebooks, right? The organizations that were built on data and the use of data. The second group are those who have experimented a little bit and are now realizing that their operating model needs to change in order to take full advantage of this at the enterprise-wide level, which is really when we talk about becoming a data-driven organization, that's the nirvana, right? I use the Sleep Number bed as an example of that. Originally, they were a mattress manufacturer. The bed went up and down. It got hard and soft, right? Now they're embedding sensors into it that allow a person to have their sleep patterns recorded and understood by the machine, which then can automatically adjust the mattress if it determines that you're sleeping restlessly and how to get you back to that restful sleep. The long-term and the most important part of this is really how are they now pivoting to become a data business, right? So aspirationally, they're going to want to connect the data that they're collecting with the mattress with the data that you are already generating with your biometric device, whether it's your Apple Watch or your Fitbit, for example, in order to ultimately alert you to the fact that you might be having a sleep apnea event periodically, or even more importantly, might you be in danger of a cardiac event, right?
Well, certainly so much medical opportunities between what the Apple Watch can do for you, smartphones and monitoring healthcare. Certainly so many things. You wrote an interesting conjecture about two types of views of bringing AI into a company, and one is a very optimistic view of applied science that'll revolutionize and somewhat disrupt markets by being innovative, versus that of the concern, rise of machines, and that it would take over life and create issues. Certainly data security, I think, would fit on that side of the viewpoints. How did you develop these two views about how organizations may view artificial intelligence, data science in their organizations?
So this is going to be transformative for every company and, in fact, for every person, right? We're already inundated. We're using it. It is being used on us. It is assisting us in doing some of the things that we do today just with our smartphones, for example, right? Or a Google search. The average organization is going to have to evolve to the point where it's no longer a black box to them, and they can begin to think differently about how to apply it. I'll use, one example with basic BI and EPM. We have had the tools for almost 30 years now to do better business, to really do performance management at the holistic level, at the organizational level. And yet we have continued to fall short. So why is that? It's basic human behavior, right? So this is not going to be an evolution around technology. We now have more technology than we know what to do with, and more tools, analytic tools. What we're going to have to do now is figure out what are the things that prevented us from, business intelligence nirvana and corporate performance management nirvana in the past. We will be forced now to deal with those things. And it is culture, it is people, it is things like how do we transform meaningfully so we get the value out of the tools at our disposal that we previously have been unable to unlock.
Absolutely. Now, on the concern side of that, I would say data security and data privacy are top of mind. You were mentioning you just got back from Brazil, where they're advancing in their viewpoints and developing data privacy policies and procedures. How do we keep our hands on around the data privacy need that is developing? Certainly more states in the United States are looking at developing data privacy regulations. What do you see on the data privacy side?
So it's really a confluence of factors, right? It's the regulatory bodies getting smarter around the dangers that are inherent in fully automating something that's based on data sets that may already have an inherent bias in them. So how do we identify those? How do we correct for it? And then how do we move, into another area where we are protecting the privacy of the individual? So you've got GDPR, which went into effect last year in May of 2018. In the United States, you and I have discussed that the states are now having to step forward because we don't have a federal mandate yet around that. And then you've got organizations or countries in, say, Latin America, like Brazil, who have already put out a framework which goes into effect August of next year. And corporations in Brazil, including just lines of business that are headquartered there, are already practicing, sort of like what we did with Sarbanes-Oxley back in the day, right? We began to practice for it a year or two before it happened. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, the flip side of that coin is, how do we ensure that as we are concerned with privacy and addressing the bias question in training data, for example, how do we ensure that it doesn't become a black box? Because in many ways today, the more advanced we get with applied data science, meaning deep learning, where you've got, thousands of layers of computation that are happening, with decisions happening every step of that way, that can't be explained. So now, how do you back into, is there bias, or is there a privacy compliance issue? It's harder and harder to identify.
And how do you see the ability of corporations, governments, to be able to manage and keep data secure? Data breach has been such an issue. I think if you ask CEOs, what they worry the most about is getting a phone call about a data breach incident in their organization. How do you see? Do you see positive developments in the ability of organizations to keep data secure from outside threats?
I think we're seeing with the breaches that are happening every day that that's going to be almost impossible to do. I think it's a risky business, and I mean that in a double entendre, right? We're at risk, but we are also owning some of this risk through our own actions. I think the most important thing that corporations need to do today is, one, ensure that they are as safe as they can be, meaning ongoing penetration testing, really understanding whether they have left any doors open, right? Particularly in this day of we're using cloud. Now we've got third-party risk. Okay, because everybody that's touching that cloud is now part of our information ecosystem, whether we believe we're secure or not. That's the first part. The second part is, as we evolve in our understanding of the use of data within our organizations and how to optimize that, and the degree to which that data becomes our crown jewels and our competitive advantage, we have to protect that. What if somebody could breach our cloud environment, get in, and change our data, or add data to it that corrupted the data set that we rely on for decision making? That I think is going to be the next hurdle that we're going to have to face with cybersecurity and data science.
Yeah, one of the conferences we were just at, a speaker talked about that you want to know exactly where your data is physically, even if it's in a cloud environment, and making sure that contracts on cloud computing can provide that. Now, you had a terrific example in the intro to your book about one of the companies I use quite often, Priceline, for travel, and you talked about how effectively they're using enterprise AI and other data science tools. Why do you like what Priceline is doing?
Well, I like them because they were one of the early adopters of supply and demand matching algorithms, right, which they applied to hotel rooms. And they did it so effectively, meaning the math was so good, that here we are 15 years later, and they are still generating margins well above the competition. because of their experience, but also the effectiveness of the starting algorithms. What they've now done, and shameless plug here, I sit on the tech advisory board of an organization called R4, and R4 was started by some of the founders of Priceline. And what they aim to do is bring this concept of enterprise AI to all the companies in the commercial world, right? What I like about them is that they have effectively created a platform that allows a business user to interact with data science in a way where they don't have to be a data scientist. Okay, so it's a matter of setting up an ontology, a relationship between all the data sets that you have without having to move everything. And it delivers the insights to a business analyst that allows them to do more effective decision making that is fact-based, right? And that's what we've been trying to get to, for the last 20 years, is true data-driven decision-making at a strategic level.
And Xena Ugrinsky, in your new book, Enterprise AI, you talk about a methodology for organizations on the enterprise level to look at implementing data science, artificial intelligence, other capabilities, and you call it the RAPID method. Maybe you could take us through the application of that and some of how it works would work for a business.
Sure. So first of all, let's talk about where RAPID was born, right? So as a partner with KPMG, I had the opportunity to meet with a lot of C-suite executives, and it very quickly became clear to me that while there are two major processes for the application of data science, none of them consider the inclusion of the business community and a more holistic view of the organization. So I developed the methodology. It's RAPID is an acronym. So rationalize to the question that you need answered, and it should be directly related to strategy, even if you're just experimenting, right? Let's experiment in the right direction. The second is aggregate. So what are the pieces I need? I need a multifunctional team to test out this hypothesis. I need the data. I need an environment, but I don't need to go out and buy a lot of technology. I need whatever the simplest environment is, usually open source is pretty cost effective, to prove out that it works. And then that's when you're moving into the prototype, right? So the entire reason for the prototype is just to prove out the hypothesis. That's where the team goes to work. You figure out which algorithms you might want to apply. Are you getting results that beat what you currently do? And if the answer to that is yes, we've successfully proven it, then you move on. If no, then you go get the second question. So let's assume for a moment we've been successful, and then we go into the I, so the implementation. That's where you begin to think about what technology to select, right? And the inputs to that are, what have we spent our money on to date? And how do we make sense of this myriad of solutions that are now available in the market with often overlapping functionality, right? So only at that point do you decide how you're going to implement this. How will it become part of your production information system? And then deployment, that's where you begin to bring that into the cultural aspects of your organization. How do we leverage this success to accelerate the transformation of our workforce to be able to work with data science? They're not all going to become data scientists, but every worker is going to have to be very comfortable interacting with data scientists, with the technology, and not to the point where they just say, well, the machine said it needs to be this way, right? That's the black box syndrome.
And Xena, in your book, you have a methodology for companies to look at applied science, artificial intelligence, what you call enterprise AI, and that is you call the rapid deployment method. Tell us a little bit about that, if you would.
Sure. It was born during the time I was a partner at KPMG, and it occurred to me over the time that I was having conversations with C-suite executives who were trying to figure out, where do we start in terms of applying data science to optimizing performance of any kind. And while there are a couple of data science specific methodologies, they don't really consider the impact of people and the business. And so my approach is an acronym for a process that allows them to identify which problems they should solve through data science because they are directly related to strategy, how to assemble the teams necessary to execute on a prototype, what to look for in the prototype, how to make it cost effective without going out and buying a lot of technology just to prototype. And then let's say they've successfully proven the hypothesis and discovered they can answer this strategic question. How do we now productionize it? So in the I, which is the implement, only then do you start looking at what technology are we going to use to productionize this? What does it have to integrate with in our current systems, if it's a decision-making technology? And how do we bring people along? There's your deploy, the D. What is it that we need to do? Do we need to train people differently? Do we need to train them to think differently about their business problems? How do we help bring them along so they're comfortable working with data scientists and with some of the technologies that are evolving now? And so the purpose was really to demystify how to get started. We talked earlier about the 3 types of companies. And we talked about, 1 and 2 being the Googles, Ubers, et cetera. And then those companies who have discovered that that they can solve a problem with data science, but have not yet thought about or are in the process of thinking about how to transform themselves into a data company. And then the third group are those who are either hoping they retire before they have to do something about it, or are just terrified and don't want to make the wrong moves. And so that is the group of companies that will get the most benefit out of the gate right away from this methodology. So, I'm very excited. We've applied it a couple of times now, and it's just a field guide.
Well, we're looking forward to that when it comes out. When do you expect it'll be available?
I'm expecting February at the latest.
Very good. So that's very, very near. And, one of the things I always ask about is how smaller companies can take advantage of these new applied science tools that are coming up. We have our friend Ross Chowdhury at SAM.ai, who's built a capability for smaller sales-oriented companies. What are some of the ways smaller companies can look at utilizing these tools, which they may frankly be a little bit intimidated by?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. For example, SAM AI is, in my view, an accessible solution that allows people to kind of get started in developing a comfort level and in how these technologies can be applied. The area I believe people are going to need to focus on is getting a basis in the basics, right? So that what this application is doing, we'll use SAM AI as an example, just it'll help them understand a little more about how it works so that they will have a higher degree of comfort, not just working with the technology, but also starting to think about what are the other things I can do with it. The next thing that it will be important for them to understand, at least the basics of applied data science, is so that they can be a better consumer of those technologies. So part of what I talk about in the book, and this applies to large companies and small, is you do need to develop a basic understanding. So I spend a fair amount of my time doing basic data science education and then data science for the executive suite, but then also helping them understand how they need to coalesce differently in order to take advantage of these technologies and in fact, just be a better consumer of those technologies, better decision making. You know, how do I differentiate between two companies that may be trying to sell me a very similar solution? I want to be informed enough so I can make that decision as a leader.
And one of the things we've been doing over the last year is a series of talks on STEM education. And you really helped define an area that I think is very important. We see it up in our talks at West Point, where they have a systems engineering program. And by defining data science, you're kind of creating a bridge between the business area in business school education, engineering, and technology management. How do you see STEM education managing technology and providing an opportunity for students to learn this whole concept of enterprise AI?
I think there are three areas. The first is we have to do a better job in our K through 12 of getting our students back to, basic mathematics and as a foundation for the workforce that we're building for the future. The second is programs like the one that R4 is doing with Cornell University. So they are demystifying data science by incorporating data science even as part of the humanities curriculum. And then third, and this is something that I'll be doing in the spring with Stony Brook University, State University of New York at Stony Brook, we're going to be introducing the business perspective to their computational science students, right? So giving them some perspective on, one, what is it like to apply these tools in a business context? Two, what are the sorts of things they're going to have to know and anticipate in working in that kind of a corporate environment with people who may not be programmers, right? So, those are the three areas I think we have to spend a lot of time thinking through, investing in, and making sure that we've got the workforce of tomorrow when we need them.
Well, we had an interview with one of the deans at Manhattan College in their engineering program, and they talked about the need for an engineer to be able to explain their project to the public and those who they may be going to for funding. So they said communication skills are vital. We've heard that all over our interview series. Now, Xena, you got teaching at Stony Brook coming up. You got your book coming out this year. What are some of the other things you're looking forward to, some of the directions of your work going into 2020, this upcoming year?
The most satisfying aspect of all of this is helping organizations reskill the workforce. I think that is the area where it has traditionally been the biggest obstacle to real technology exploitation. When by exploitation, I mean getting the value that you expect it to, or the ROI out of your investments. That is going to be the most important thing we do. But the even more important than that, if we get this right and we create a workforce for tomorrow that can effectively apply these tools, then we have within our grasp ending world poverty, ending world hunger, electricity for everyone, reversal of climate change. These are the sorts of things that are aspirational for me. This is why I do what I do. It used to be that I was just excited about making business people's lives better through technology, and now I've shifted to we have the opportunity to make the world a better place because of the tools that we now have at our disposal, but we need the people who understand how to do it. And that's what I see coming in the future.
Well, Xena Ugrinsky, that is great to hear. I got to say, we were down at the American Museum of Natural History for their commemoration of the Apollo moon landing this summer, and we were talking about how far technology has grown in the last 70, the 70 years before the moon landing, and really the years since the harnessing of electricity. We talked to Dr. Hank Foley down at New York Institute of Technology about that. Do you see the same level of growth of technology in the coming years?
I not only see that, I see it happening at a rate that will blow everyone's minds. Yeah.
Well, managing that's going to be a great challenge, and I think that's why technology education is going to be so important, and the being able to do that together with an understanding of the world through the humanities that you described so well. So, Xena Ugrinsky, great to have a chance to talk with you. We'll look forward to your book coming out in February, Enterprise AI, Your Field Guide to the New Business Normal. Best wishes to you for the new year. Thank you very much, Ken. Appreciate the time. Good to see you. And so for CBSIServices Talking Business from Long Island, this is Ken Kraetzer.